Before I begin, I just wanted to talk a little bit about SBDC specifically. They have a lot of COVID-19 related resources. They're really focused on helping businesses deal with pandemic issues, but not just that. They have a lot of other material. And if you go to their website on their homepage and there's a link on the upper right about workshops, and there's a lot of great workshops that might be of interest to you. They also do replays from previous workshops and have a lot of good stuff going forward. I definitely encourage you to look into that. My name is Larry Donahue. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for way too long, unfortunately. I think I'm going to hit 29 or 30 years shortly. And about a third of my pay, my revenue, comes from partnership disputes. And so we put a little fun presentation together, but it's really a serious discussion about partnership issues. And we're going to try and give you, we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics, but the goal here is to help you avoid bad partnerships. And if you're in one, what you might be able to do about it. I have a lot of stories that I can share with you that I'll do so over the next hour. So what we're going to talk about is the characteristics to avoid with any potential business partner. And then how do you determine if you have a current vampire partner and what you could do about it. We're going to discuss some of the COVID issues and what has happened and what you can do. And then what you can, make long-term or short-term goals around getting rid of vampire-based partners. And the reason we're saying vampire partner is that they do a great job of sucking the business dry or sucking you of your energy. And, businesses are a lot of work, and you really need to devote your energies to your employees, your customers, your business processes, your fulfillment, and having to spend energy on a bad partner is really problematic for a business. You want a partner that gives you energy and helps you, not the other way around. So we're going to talk about how to disengage from a bad business partner and what you can do to ensure good partnerships going forward. Now, before I jump into the good stuff, I need to warn you, I am an attorney. I've been an attorney a long time, but I'm not your attorney. And the SBDC is not a law firm either. So we have to be a little careful about providing legal advice. So you really should interpret what I say as generally speaking without specific focus to you, because just about everything I say is or isn't the law or is or isn't in the statute can vary depending on specific circumstances. So just view this as general advice. With all of that said, what is a vampire business partner? It's somebody that has these traits I've listed here, and it's not a complicated science. I think these patterns, these traits, I see over and over and over again. They won't work hard. They have large egos. They lack emotional fortitude. They take, and they don't give. They cannot afford to be a partner, for instance, where, a business may need to not pay your wages for a little while because you need money for inventory. I've seen partners where they're just the victim constantly, and heaven forbid if there's a disagreement between you and your partner and you're attacking them, they're the victim. So these are the common characteristics. There are others, narcissistic behaviors, although they'll have a bunch of these, but these are the common ones. And what you need to understand is there is no law or statute that protects you against a bad business partner. Think of it like a marriage. There aren't laws that protect you from a bad spouse. I mean, sure, abuse and violence issues and so on, that the law protects you against. And that's the same thing with a partner. But if you have just a faithless spouse or somebody who's not in the long game with you, it's the same thing with a partner. And so there's no statute that's going to protect you from that. Worse, I've had terrible instances, and we'll go over some of them, where a partner is stealing from the company. And you can't really call the police. The police don't recognize partnerships the same way they do strangers. And so if you have a partner stealing from you, they'll say, I'm not stealing, I'm paying myself. I'm entitled to do that. And what are the police going to do? So you could spend lots and lots and lots of money with us lawyers, and a lot of people do that. Or you could be smart and be careful about who you go into a partnership with. So let's go through some of these different issues and talk about some of the habits of these various traits that we discussed. One is there are some people that just don't want to work hard. And you need to understand a successful business is a lot of work. It could be the most work you've ever done in your life if you go with a small business or you try to start up a small business. And so you want to avoid these kinds of things we've listed here. Someone who is not engaged at their current job, or they want to have more than one job, for instance, and think they can help you on the side. Maybe they can, but maybe they can't. And if they can't, then what do you do? And there's habits, you could tell, bad habits, bad work habits that you want to avoid with a partner. Somebody habitually comes in at 10 or leaves by 3, or maybe they're a good person, but they want to change the way they do, their quality of life, and they want to wind down or transition into retirement, or they only want to work a few days a week. That's not a good partner. They may be friendly or they may know a lot about something, but if they're not going to be available to the business and burn the midnight oil and tighten the belt when you need to do it for the business to survive, it's just not going to make a great partner. The other one is, we have somebody who's only available certain times of the day or takes a long time or days to return phone calls. Here's a news flash. If they exhibit these behaviors before they're a partner, making them a partner is not going to improve their behavior. They're going to continue to exhibit these traits and get worse once they're a partner, not better. And so I have a real world example here, and I'm not exaggerating. It was a lady who, had a bunch to offer a business. And so she went into partnership with my client, and my client, working very hard, 7 days a week. And this partner, 50-50 partner, not only didn't want to work weekends, but Friday was their quote unquote creative day, meaning they weren't available at all. And they said, oh, they're thinking about creative ideas. It was nonsense. So basically this 50% partner was working 4 days of work or 4 days on the business while my client was working 7 days. And it just didn't feel even or equivalent. And so therefore having to share profits 50-50 just didn't make a lot of sense to my client with this particular example. So another one, the large egos, you know who these people are. They tell you about it. They use pronouns like I, it's all about themselves, me, my, mine, versus the, more inclusive pronouns, the we, us, and ours. And they'll use this over and over again with the stories they tell. They'll take, credit for other people's contributions or exaggerate their own contributions. And that's really a big problem, believe it or not. Maybe you can handle it as a partner, but I promise you, some of your key employees aren't going to be able to handle it. If you have people that are volunteering work or, helping out on the side, they're not going to be able to handle it. And what's going to happen is a lot of people are not confrontational. They're not going to say, I can't stand your partner. They're just not going to be available to help. They might have other work to do. You're going to find it harder to get good people to help you in your business. The other attributes, they'll be, a little vain. They care about the vanity details, their title, their recognition. And remember, the problem with these people is they are focused on themselves, and you really want to look at what their behavior is when they don't think anybody is paying attention. The clues are in their verbiage and how they communicate with you. And that can kill a good partnership. And even if you think you can handle it, they may not be able to handle it. If you aren't somebody that's going to, give ongoing praise, or if you yourself, are going to have your own things to deal with or contributions, and it may create jealousy for them and create friction between the two of you. So the other thing we talked about was emotional fortitude. And this is really important. How do they handle constructive criticism? If you have difficult customers, do they get mad at those customers? Are they able to handle them and deal with them properly? Are they gonna piss off customers, and then those customers are gonna go and give bad reviews and ratings to the business? Are they gonna get upset when you guys have a vote with something and you disagree with them? Can they handle it in a mature, competent, professional manner? Or are you going to have dealing with a child, an emotional child that you got to babysit and worry about how they feel about certain things? Do they surround themselves with yes people that may not have a great competency level? Are they hiring based on, giving them the emotional support they need versus hiring people for their competence and their capability and contributions to the business? I have another real world story here. It was actually tied to one of my partnerships. I had a specific partner who couldn't stop crying in a meeting. If anything ever went the wrong way, they would start tearing up, getting upset, and it would create discomfort with the other partners, and to the point where we'd have to stop the meeting, have them go, fix themselves, and basically anything that this was a problem for this person, they would start, crying, and it made people very uncomfortable. And it's just, the emotions need to stay out of the business. You need to be focused on the issues and be able to have a professional discussion about things versus having to deal with the emotional side of things. It slows things down. It turns people off. Have partners that otherwise want to get work done, don't want to be a part of the partnership meetings. So you want to avoid stuff like that if at all possible, or people who exhibit those kinds of traits. The one that I struggle with is the takers and not the givers. And it's easy to not spot that, not to see how that might affect the business. But we have some examples here where they're signals you need to pay attention to. Are they looking for free stuff, free advice? Are they very cost conscious? Do they offer to volunteer to pick up the tab, or at least split the bill when you guys are at a coffee or a lunch or a dinner? Are they philanthropic? Do they volunteer their time or not? Have you ever had an issue where they might borrow something like tools and not return them, or borrow something significant, a trailer, a vehicle, and not value it, not returning it right away, or clean, or on time, or where it's supposed to go? Does it feel like they just don't value what you give them or lend to them or share with them? And if so, you might have a vampire business partner. And I know these points might seem trivial, but what they do is they recognize or identify who the person is inside, and it can become a bigger issue longer term. And so, you want to avoid partners that are cheap or selfish, especially with the other partners. You want partners that aren't selfish. They're willing to contribute their time, their resources. They value your contributions. They value what you bring to the table. And if they're going to borrow something from you, that they treat it with respect and return it and do things that you would otherwise expect of yourself. So this is a big one. And I see a lot of partners, my clients, not think through these issues. When you're starting a business or you have a small business, it's tough. You have to, drum up business. You have to meet payroll. And if you can't do those things, or if you have an important client that slow pays you or doesn't pay you, it could be a huge problem for your business. And so your partner needs to have some financial wherewithal, especially at least to match your own. And so that means if you have to forego paying yourselves for a pay period or a month, your partner can do that versus your partner can't. And then you got to pay your partner, but your business can't afford it. And so then what? Do you not pay you even though you're paying your partner? You don't want to be in that situation. So if you're going to form a partnership with somebody, you need to look at the personal tax returns. You need to look at the bank statements. Do they have a gambling habit? Are there excessive overdrafts with their bank account? Now, why do I ask that? It's because I've had this issue. We've had issues with our clients having partners who, the moment they got paid, they were going off to Sandia Casino and spending all their money. And that could be a potential problem for the business. Do they owe on their taxes? Are they filing their taxes late? It could show a level of financial, incapability or a lack of financial wherewithal that you want to address. You should consider a credit report. Is their debt load manageable? Are they paying their bills on time? And I don't want to say everybody's going to steal from the company, but if they're struggling to meet their bills, they are not going to be a good source of revenue or even be able to be tolerant of, slow periods with the business. You really need to think about that. And then, of course, I've had clients dealing with actual theft where they're stealing money from the company. And you definitely don't want to put yourself in a situation like that. But why do we care about all this? Well, you don't want to be doing business with a quote unquote financial moron, somebody who just doesn't understand finances and, being able to make financial decisions and priorities. You don't want to be the only one on the financial hook, and that will happen. If your partner doesn't have the ability to have the same level of financial capability you do, it's going to happen. You're going to take, if you can't pay yourselves, they're going to need to get paid. You're not going to pay yourself. And before you know it, there's going to be a level of disparity between your partner and yourself. There's times where you need to get a loan or a line of credit. And let me just, I say this a lot in my other presentations that I give them, but I want to say that here. If you don't have a line of credit, I want you to get one. And if you're saying to yourself, oh, I don't need one, that's the perfect time to get. You want a line of credit in the backdrop when you don't need it, because when you do need it, it's going to be very hard to get, if not impossible. Now, you can certainly get credit, but I'm trying to keep you away from the sharks, the financial, they're like finance companies. You can find them on the internet. You do not want that kind of debt obligation with a business because it's extremely expensive. There's front-loaded costs. They attach to your accounts receivable, and the interest rate is outrageous. Very difficult to get out from underneath those kinds of loans. What I'm talking about is you're going to, one of the local banks, the Wells Fargo, Bank of Albuquerque, Bank of America, one of the credit unions, the local folks that can give you a low interest line of credit that does not cost a lot to open and does not cost a lot to use. That's what I want you to get if you don't have it. And guess what? You can get it if all the partners have good financials, good sound financials. If somebody was bankrupt, if somebody is having trouble paying their bills, it's going to be a problem for your business to get that line of credit. And you really need that, especially in today's pandemic, when you might have customers or clients slow paying you or just have an inability to pay. And, I brought up the foregoing compensation from time to time, but that's a very common thing for small and medium-sized businesses that you need to think about. Finally, the victim card. What you have to do is don't be afraid to do an interview or check referrals of your partner. What does their last supervisor say? Or their last business partner? What are they saying about your new potential partner? The words out of their mouth are going to help you understand whether, they're narcissistic or they care about themselves versus others. But you really want to get a sense for how well did they work with others in their previous experience or previous life. That is really important to do. And guess what? They should do that about you as well. You want to make sure that both of you are compatible And what you want to do is check for the victim side. Are they, it's interesting because I had an issue with a different partner in the past where, you talk to them and every single previous job they had, there was some problem. They attacked them, they kicked them out of the business. They were, they struggled with adversity over and over and over again, and to the point where you're like, why is this a common theme with you? Why is every single previous employer or partner having trouble with you? Is the common link here seems to be you, not the other people being, problematic. And so you really, really need to understand that past behavior is always the best predictor of future behavior. And, even friends, family, they could, have this victim mentality. And what happens is that they start, looking towards you as the problem, because you're attacking them, you're taking their money, you're making it difficult for them to do a good job. And that's going to create a heck of a lot of friction between the two of you. And I promise you, they will not change their behavior if you become more accommodating or you give them what they want. It is just a fundamental flaw of these folks, and you want to stay as far away from them as you possibly can. Let's ask ourselves, is your current partner a vampire? Can you figure this out? And if your current partner is displaying any of these following, it's time to think about an exit plan. So what I just talked about were some of the attributes to avoid if you're thinking about partnering with someone. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about, well, I'm already in the relationship. Now what do I do? It's too late because I'm already in that relationship. So what do you do? How do you recognize, one, if you have such a bad partner or a vampire partner? One is, you're working and they don't. They're collecting a check, but not contributing much elsewhere. They are being a drain on the business. Can you really afford that? People to be paying a paycheck and them not doing a lot of work? Or they started a business with somebody else. They're doing a little bit of work for you and they're doing a little bit of work for somebody else. That's a vampire. They, mismanage their personal affairs in a way that has negative consequences for you or your business or your partnership. I have some examples here, debt, messy divorces, personal liability, and not all of this is your partner's fault, possibly. But if they can't manage it properly, if they can't insulate the business and their work, with the partnership in the business from these personal things, that can have a problem for you. And I'm going to give you one example. I have a lawyer that had, past tense, a lawyer who, just overreacted to certain circumstances and situations. And that lawyer had a lot of value when client wanted a very aggressive lawyer. So that lawyer was just, gangbusters, just always gangbusters, always on, always on. And so some clients wanted that. However, this person, if they felt slighted in the least possible, in any possible way, in anything in their lives, it was the same thing, gangbusters. Well, they decided to go after, and I can't get into too many details because it's probably in the news, but this person decided to go after a fairly visible entity in the community that has a lot of, links and value to other businesses in the world. And so I had this lawyer who was attacking this entity who wasn't a client of ours. There was no client relationship, no financial reward to us, but it was making us look really bad because he's acting like a junkyard dog going after a local, community entity that I felt isn't appropriate. So it made us look bad. And, I want to warn you about that. If you have a partner who is, not able to manage certain things, outside the company, how does that reflect and look at your company and your business? And you need to understand New Mexico is a small community. So if you have a partner that's going to go and act like an idiot out in the real world, it's going to come back and impact you somehow. So hopefully you have a business partner that isn't mismanaging their personal affairs. The other one here is, are they making one bad decision after another? Are they making bad hiring decisions? Are they signing or entering into contracts that don't make a lot of sense? Are they not doing due diligence because they're just lazy or, have too much going on elsewhere? That could be a big problem. You want a partner that makes good business decisions. Is there a lack of professionalism in the way they dress, the way they interact with others? I'm a lawyer. We expect to shave and wear fairly decent, business attire. Are they not dressing for the job? Do they have hygiene issues? Or, do they want to take employees out to go drinking? These are things that lack professionalism because employees shouldn't necessarily be friends, and you certainly shouldn't be taking them out drinking. Do they have substance abuse issues? Speaking of drinking, are they using at work? Are they sleeping during working hours? Are there arrests and DWIs? If you have that kind of thing, they're definitely going to be a drain on your business. Or they don't fight fair. Will they take routine business discussions and disagreements and make them personal? Can you have a good conversation about difficult issues without getting personal? And if things are getting personal, that means you can't really have good discussions, and that means you can't resolve problems for the business. So any of these things that I've talked about, if you have a business partner exhibiting these, they are a vampire. They are a drain on your business. They are sucking your resources, sapping your resources, something you need to think about getting rid of them. And so let me give you a couple of examples of business partners gone wild, we're calling it. But these are actual circumstances we've had to deal with. And one of them was a son who forcibly removed the father from the premises, physically, literally threw him out of the place, and then started forging the father's name, locking the father out of the business. And the father was our client. And it created a lot of difficult problems. The first one was just the emotional issue, the violence issue, and having to deal with that. That's very difficult, especially, for the fathers who become a little older in age, a little more infirm. There isn't the ability to defend themselves, number one. Two, when you have a partner, the son, forging documents, forging signatures, that becomes very difficult to deal with, because one is we have a proof problem. Is it the son doing it? Is this signature forged versus the other one? And then how do we undo and unwind all of it? When I told you earlier that there are laws available to protect you against bad partners, that's within a certain context. I mean, certainly, we can rely on statute to prevent forgery. However, it's an expensive proof problem. And what I mean by that is we have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars hiring signature experts, looking at what damages were created and how to undo the damage. So we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in legal bills, in expert witness bills, and courts. And courts don't make decisions right away. It spreads the problem out over a long period of time, potentially years. So what do you do during the year or years you're fighting about this in court with a family member and hiring expert witnesses and dealing with all the money? It's going to kill your business. And so, in fact, it sure did kill this business. So my client didn't have the money to hire the expert witnesses, didn't have the money to pay tens of thousands of dollars going back and forth to court. So what we ended up doing was negotiating a buyout where the son bought my client out, but it wasn't a great deal for my client, right? The son knew that my client didn't have a lot of money. And so the son took advantage of that. And so I think we did great under the circumstances, but it really put our client in a bad circumstance. You don't want that to happen. We've seen a couple of issues with COVID lately where some partners are ganging up on the sick. A partner was, in particular, our client came down with COVID and had to take some time off, a couple of months of time off. He was in the hospital for a while. And when he came back, the locks were changed. He didn't have access to the bank accounts anymore. And so you are not entitled to change the locks on your partner. You are entitled to change the locks, sure, but the partner is entitled to change the locks back. And so what do? Get into a dispute about, changing the locks constantly? So if I have a client who walks, tries to get into the premises and they're locked, I can say, well, go get a locksmith and change them. But if the other partner now is going to prevent that, through violence, yes, we can call the police, and maybe the police will get involved and maybe they won't. Really, the only solution there is to file a lawsuit and then claim that, constructive, termination of the partnership agreement. There's a lot of different legal levers we can pull when that happens, but we're filing a lawsuit. That takes a retainer, that takes money, that takes time. We have to file the lawsuit, and there is a complaint filed. We serve the other party. The other party then needs 20 to 30 days, depending on what court we filed it in, to file a response. Then the court is going to take anywhere from a month to a few months to have a hearing. We could ask for a restraining order. We could do that, but we have to show, a lot of problems. Monetary damages is not enough to get a restraining order. So in order to solve our client's problem here, we have to file the lawsuit. We're looking at many months and many thousands of dollars, and that eventually is going to affect the other partner as well. So we have several of these now going on, interestingly enough. Finally, we have another example here of forced retirement. We've had a case of where a bunch of junior partners ganged up on the older founding member and basically pushed them out. And it's really interesting on whether that's possible. And why I say that is the formation documents are going to dictate how to deal with certain circumstances, edge cases. What happens if somebody gets, death or incapacitated? Can the other members vote and vote somebody out of the company? Those are going to be in the partnership documents. And in this particular case, the founding member couldn't be voted out, but what they did is created a hostile work environment for this individual. They weren't friendly with them. They weren't, they're making them feel very uncomfortable. And so we had to negotiate a settlement where the junior members purchased the senior members' membership interest, but that was a problem that would only get worse if we didn't do the buyout at that point. So the question is, how do you avoid nightmare scenarios like this? And the answer is, you don't go into partnership with those people in the first place if you can avoid it. If you are in partnership with them already, you want good, strong formation documents. And if that's too late, then there's some other things that we can do, other levels we can do, or levers we can pull, and we'll discuss some of them now. So let's say you are in a partnership with a vampire. What do you do? So the first one is, you stay calm and you need to document everything. Keep a journal. And I hope this goes without saying, but don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. You want to avoid confrontations and disagreements, and you want to avoid verbal agreements. So I know that sounds kind of weird, right? Avoid verbal disagreements, but avoid verbal agreements. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean is if you have an agreement to do anything, you want to write it down, and it could be something even simple as an email, quickly email saying, to your partner, hey, Fred, just want to confirm you said it's okay, or you agree with me to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, and send the email. You don't even need a response. At least you can show you sent the message and the communication, and a lack of response can be, almost not as good as a response, but it could still be used against the other party if we have to. And then if you have disinterested third parties available, it's great to have them available when necessary, whether it's employees that you agree with or, have a good relationship with, family members. But sometimes having a third party around can help deter, bad behavior. For instance, the violent son, for instance, that I mentioned in my previous example, all the instances of violence where when it was just the two of them around, the son wasn't doing that when other people were around, like the mother or other family members. I would recommend too, you call an attorney, adopt a new operating agreement with accountability. If you have an LLC, if you have a corporation, I'd recommend you look at the bylaws and the buy-sell agreement and see what you can do about accountability of the various partners for, to address whatever the issues are. If you don't have an LLC or a corporation, you just have a generic partnership, I'd encourage you, this is the time. Get an LLC form, get the right operating agreement together. If you want to do a corporation, although there's very limited circumstances, I would recommend a corporation over an LLC. But an LLC is very inexpensive, easy to do, very fast, and it could fill in some of the gaps that in exposures you might have today if you don't have something like that. Now, if you feel it's too late for that, where it's not an issue of just making sure you can hold your partner accountable, but that it's time to leave, then I think you need to start working on a separation agreement. And when I say separation agreement, it doesn't necessarily have to be a written document today, but it could be, for example, just feeling your partner out, saying, look, things are really tough. I could tell, you get annoyed with me easily. Do you see a scenario here where maybe you want to buy me out or I can buy you out? What do you think? And start laying the groundwork. But do not walk away from the company. You can't do that. You're going to give that partner carte blanche to do anything, and liabilities can potentially attach to you, especially outstanding lines of credit, credit card bills, other liabilities. You have to have a separation agreement that draws a very specific line in the sand. On this date, the partnership concluded or you left the business, as well as, you need to deal with those issues like, taxes, back taxes, gross receipts taxes, liabilities, outstanding credits that might be owed to other businesses or people. Finally, I want you to be proactive. If it's a problem this year, don't let it continue the next year. I know it's April, it's probably too late for your New Year's Eve resolution, but I would suggest you make the resolution this year to cut the cord, to move on, to either get your partner out of the business or you get yourself out of the business. And I promise you, by getting rid of that vampire partner, you are only going to be better. You're only going to improve your situation and your business's situation. If your partnership is good and you like it and you don't have a problem, then you should work on keeping it that way. And we have a couple of suggestions here for you. One is it's okay to disagree on occasion. And what you might want to do is when you have a big disagreement, lay out like a rules of engagement when you deal with disagreements. Do you do a flip of the coin? Or maybe sometimes if you have a 50-50 partnership, this seems to be the biggest problem that I've encountered is 50-50 partnerships. But, maybe you rotate, disagreement number one, let them make the decision with the promise that the next disagreement, you get to make the decision. So you can kind of take turns. That's one way to do it. Flipping a coin is another way. Paper, rock, scissors. I know that seems kind of silly, but the intent is to add fairness to the company in the disagreements so that what you don't want to do is just have deadlocks constantly. Then it's very difficult for the business to make forward progress and momentum. I mentioned the solid partnership agreements on the last slide, and I cannot overemphasize how important that is. So if you have an LLC, you want a good operating agreement. If you have an LLC without an operating agreement, get one, for crying out loud. I can't tell you how many clients I talk to, and then they run into a problem. They don't have the operating agreement. And you know what that means? If you have no operating agreement, we have to go to the law, to the statute. If you have a New Mexico limited liability company, it's called the New Mexico Limited Liability Company Act. It's arcane, it's very super high level and general. And I promise you, it does not have any of the details you're going to need to resolve a dispute or hold people accountable. So get the operating agreement. There's no excuse for not having it. And for corporations, the equivalent would be the bylaws and a buy-sell agreement. If you have investors, there may be an investor agreement. If you have employee ownership or you're promising employee ownership, there's probably going to be a separate document for that. And please, for the love of God, do not promise ownership to employees without a document in place. And don't even hold it out there as a carrot until you have a formal plan and program in place. That's a great way to bring in vampire business partners, is saying, oh yeah, I'll make you an owner. Let me, I'll make you a part owner. Let me talk to the lawyers and figure it out. And then you find out that this employee you don't want around anymore. Now what are you going to do? And then you didn't talk to the attorney, or the attorney didn't get back to you in time. So you don't have a good structure in place. And now you have this bad employee saying, hey, you promised me 20% of the company, pay up. So don't get yourself in that situation. In your formation documents, you want to consider a duties and responsibilities clause. And what that does is outline general duties. And you don't have to get too specific here. General is good. And let me give you 2 examples. Do you have a duty of loyalty to the company? Do you focus your energies and efforts on the one company, or can they work with other companies? Do we have a duty to avoid conflicts? If I'm doing a partnership with you, can I go and do other partnerships with other people or not? These are high level things that don't say, well, I'm going to be responsible for taking out the trash on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but at least it sets standards in place so that I can't go and start a competitive business, for instance. Disassociation is a big one. Can somebody leave a company or not, voluntarily or not? Can you force somebody else out or not? With a 50-50 partnership, that's almost always impossible. But when you have other forms of ownership, let's say a third, or maybe you have a bigger owner, somebody owes 40%, you have 20% owners, you run the circumstance where the 40% owner and one of the 20% owners can force out the other 20% owner. Is that okay or not? Do you not want to allow force outs, or do you? Or do you want force outs under certain circumstances? I'll give you an example. I have a law firm. I have a partner. We have to be lawyers. We have to be licensed in the state of New Mexico to do business. So if my partner were to lose his legal license, he has to go. And same with me. If I lose my license, gotta go, because it will create a problem for the firm. And we have the same issues with certain types of medical practices. If you're a contractor, GB98, and you're relying on that license and somebody loses the license, that could be a problem. So it could be what's called automatic disassociation events, depending on the type of event and what happens. And then the professional bad behaviors. So what do we mean by that? Well, crimes of passion, or crimes, white collar crimes, or, things that might impinge on your professionalism, thefts. Even if you do that outside the business, could create a problem for the business itself. And so, bankruptcies may be an example of that. I don't want to say what is or isn't a good idea, but, for instance, lawyers, I talked about the licensing issue, but if my partner, for instance, were to get arrested I'm not going to pick on my partner, let's pick on myself. If I were to go and, be accused, not accused, but, I arrested and then convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, theft, is a good one, fraud, stuff like that. I don't deserve to be a partner of a law firm. And the law firm itself would suffer to be associated with somebody like me if I was convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, for example. So that is in our operating agreement, and maybe that's appropriate for your business or maybe not, but that's something you should definitely think about. So let me close with some final thoughts, and then we'll see if we have any questions for you guys. It's never too late to update, change, or amend your operating agreement. If you don't have an operating agreement today, you need one. If you do have one, you can create what's called an amended operating agreement. Let's say you have one, you've only had your one operating agreement. The new amended one would be called the First Amended Operating Agreement. And it's very inexpensive to set up and do. I would recommend you seriously consider that and consider it a living document. And here's why. A lot of businesses start as a disregarded entity for tax purposes. Maybe you were the only owner. And then a year comes around and you bring in a partner. Well, guess what? There's two problems. One is you have a partner. And second, you cannot rely on disregarded tax treatment anymore. So if you don't do anything, it's going to default to a partnership and you have a second partner. So you need an operating agreement for that because a partnership has very specific tax requirements and needs. But let's say now flash forward a few more years and it's making a lot of money and your accountant recommends that you should be taxed as an S Corp. Well, you can keep your LLC and it can be taxed as an S Corp, but it has very different tax requirements for the operating agreement. And the operating agreement should be updated to reflect S Corp tax treatment. The other thing you want to think about is, bad partners are holding you and your family's livelihoods in their hands. Do not overlook red flags and don't delay the inevitable. You're only going to make things worse. And good businesses is almost like putting money in the bank with interest, right? It builds interest over time. It grows over time. If you have a vampire sucking the energy and the money and the resources, or your ability over time, you're just robbing yourself of the future growth and success of your business. And I'm going to warn you, it's probably going to cost you money to get rid of that vampire partner if you are going to buy them out. And that's okay, because that money that you go to spend with that vampire partner, you will eventually get it back in a number of different ways. Growth in the business, better energy for yourself, self-fulfillment. It's going to be worth it in the long run. And, finally, don't settle. Choose partners that help you, that don't hinder you and don't hinder your business. It is a huge, just take interest rates for a moment. If you're paying interest, your $100 decreases significantly over time. And if you're getting interest, it grows significantly over time. It's the same thing with a partner. If the partner is contributing and adding value to the business, that's like interest on your money. And vice versa. If you have a vampire partner, it's like you're paying interest on your money. It's sapping your health and your wealth. It's sapping the business's ability to grow. One, it makes me sad, tears me up a little bit, because it was a client of mine who died in the middle of a big dispute or debate with his partner. And I can't share names, because if I shared names, you'd know who these people are. One of them, my client, is part of a New Mexico family dynasty and had a rather successful business in town. And he had a partner, a 50-50 partner with a CPA. That CPA happened to be brothers of a fairly prominent politician in the state of New Mexico. And so it looked to my client like it was a partnership, a great partnership, because my client was really good at what he did. And his partner was a licensed CPA, certified public accountant, and had a lot of political connections. And so it looked like that individual is going to provide a lot of leads in business to this business event. So at any rate, it actually did quite well for a few years, became a fairly large business in the state of New Mexico. And there started to develop some friction between my client and his partner, the CPA. And the friction was because of some of the financial issues I had mentioned before, where the business would struggle to meet payroll or pay some bills, which didn't make sense at all to my client because the business was actually doing fairly well. And the question was, why the hell is this happening? And the CFO, his partner, who's the CPA, so partner CPA, who was acting CFO for the company, chief financial officer. His response was, I got it handled, don't worry about it. And my partner, my client, the partner would be like, what do you mean you got it handled? We're not able to pay ourselves, or you're not able to pay me. Clearly there's something going on here. And his partner would be like, I have it handled, have it handled. So I got hired eventually because my client was not able to get a copy of the financials. His partner would lock him out of QuickBooks, wouldn't give him access to anything. So I was hired originally to just get the partner to provide financials and provide the statements and treat my client like an equal partner of the company. Well, we got access to the books, and they did not match at all my client's experience with what was going on with the company. So we did the outrageous thing of hiring a forensic accountant. The forensic accountant, and the reason I say outrageous is because it's expensive, number one, and two, it's a lot of work and you got to do a lot of digging. And so it's a very public affair. So we hired the forensic accountant, and the forensic accountant figured out within a matter of days that the CFO was keeping a second set of books, 2 sets of books. And the financials that they gave us were the doctored up financials, the incorrect financials. And so we had to go to court and get a court order to allow us to get access to the real set of books. And once we found the real set of books, we found that there's bank accounts out there that my client, the partner, didn't even have access to. There were huge debts on the books with these expensive finance companies. And so the other side, my client's partner, was doing a shell game every day, moving money around to try and pay finance debts and move money in and out. So it was a business on fire. It was a dumpster fire floating down the street. And my client had no idea about this, number one. So as the forensic accountants dove into this further, they found out that my client's partner, the CPA who's acting as the CFO, was writing all kinds of personal expenses through the company. So, and I'll give you one example, and we're talking about thousands, but one example was, it was a Kohl's expenditure. If you guys know Kohl's, you know, they do, you know, clothing and stuff like that. There's one on Paseo and Wyoming maybe. And it was coded computer equipment. Well, if you've ever been to Kohl's, you'll know they don't sell computer equipment. So several $100s worth of computer equipment was purchased, at least if you look at the books. But because we knew Kohl's didn't sell computer equipment, what we knew is this partner was bought himself several $100s worth of clothes from Kohl's and coded his computer equipment. Now, if you multiply that times thousands of different entries, you know, golf clubs, a pool at his house, it was outrageous. So anyway, it turned into this huge fight, and we ended up going into mediation, and we were basically buying the partner out. And it was a big debate because it's like, look, you spent, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on personal expenses that should have been the businesses. So we're going to deduct that from what we owe you. So there was a big fight and debate, but we reached a settlement. We reached a number that my client was comfortable with, and the other guy was willing to sign on the dotted line and leave the company. However, there was a 3-month waiting period as we kind of got all the finances sorted out, and my client died within that 3-month waiting period. And what happened was, he was very depressed about everything, and he ended up having a medical emergency and not surviving through it. And that my client had a family that was relying on all of this. So the moment my client died, the other partner swooped in and started then reallocating assets and taking full ownership of the company. And it left my client's family having to deal with a whole new crazy lawsuit that, one, they knew nothing about, 2, they weren't financially prepared for, and then 3, just shocked, you know, with the loss of my client, their family member. It was just a terrible situation that I would never want anybody to go through. But the lesson here is, your partner needs to be upfront with you on the financials. And if things look a little fishy, you know, you need to be, you know, no information needs to be withheld from partners. Otherwise, you know, you got a problem. So that was a long-winded Bad example, but there you go.
No, it shows us your passion for the subject and how people can protect themselves and really get the information that they need, when you talk about operational agreements and stuff. And I do want to remind everyone that organizational management cybersecurity webinar that we have, I think will go along with setting up protections and controls also. One question sounds like I need to set up any accounting software, not a potential CFO. So I think it goes along the same lines, is that we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and our company.
My answer to John's question is yes, and not just your accounting software. If you hire SEO and marketing people, you want to establish the social media accounts and the Gmail and the Google accounts. You want to have ownership of all those accounts, and then you give access to your other providers or people or partners. And that's the best way to maintain ownership and control of your important assets.